All right, welcome to the conversation on the TYT Network. We now have a guest you might be familiar with. Senator Bernard Sanders joins us from Vermont. Senator Sanders, great to talk to you again.
Great to be with you, Cenk.
All right, I'm going to jump right into it. We got a task force that Joe Biden announced. It's got one of your allies on it. First of all, what is the purpose of that task force?
Well, to be frank, the purpose of the task force is to move the Biden campaign in as progressive a direction as we possibly can. We have put on those task forces some of the most progressive members of Congress, some of the most progressive people in this country, who are going to be sitting down with representatives of the Biden campaign. And our job is to do everything we can to create a set of papers to take into the Democratic Convention, which represents the working class of this country, which represents the need to transform our energy system, which represents the need to take on the greed of a billionaire class, which has gone so far in undermining the economy of the United States.
So, Senator, some progressive critics are saying, look, you don't need a task force to figure out what the right environmental policy is. It's the Green New Deal. You don't need one on healthcare. It's Medicare for all. So since obviously Joe Biden doesn't have those positions, what is the ideal outcome policy-wise for this kind of task force?
Well, the answer is obvious. Look, I happen to be, a very strong proponent of Medicare for all. And Cenk, I have to believe that in this moment, when tens of millions of workers who have lost their jobs have also lost their health care, because in this country, health care is considered an employee benefit. What is simply true is the vast majority of the American people now understand that health care is a human right and not just an employee benefit. And we're going to push Biden as far as we can. So what does that mean? How does it end up? Well, I don't know. I'm not on the task force. But what it may mean is lowering the eligibility age for Medicare from 65 down to 55. I hope it means that. It may mean that covering all children in this country. It may mean taking on the greed and corruption of the pharmaceutical industry so that we substantially lower prescription drug prices in this country and not pay the highest prices in the world. We got to work on that issue. It may mean greatly expanding community health centers all over this country and making sure we have doctors and nurses practicing in underserved areas in rural America and in urban areas. So, look, their views are not my views. That's a fact. But the goal of these task forces, whether it is the Green New Deal, Medicare for all, eliminating student debt, all of the things that I campaigned on, is to move them as far as we possibly can.
And how important do you think in that process of moving the Biden team is the VP pick? And do you have a preference there?
I don't. That's an issue that I have not been involved in. It's obviously important. And what I would say is that in terms of a VP pick, you're talking about two basic issues. Number one is, what is the ideology of the vice presidential nominee? How progressive is she going to be? And second of all, the personal chemistry that person will have with Biden, because chemistry has a lot to do with the process. But that's an issue that Biden will make. But this is what I do want to say, Cenk, is that my hope is that not only will we be successful in moving the Biden campaign in a more progressive area, not just on healthcare, not just on the economy, not just on climate change, but on education, immigration, reform, other areas, but that Biden will understand that it is important for him to have progressives in his cabinet as well. Because you know and I know that you can have all of the position papers that you want, all of the ideology out there that you want. But at the end of the day, you're going to need strong progressives to implement those policies. And if you don't have those progressives in the cabinet, these policy changes will probably not take place.
I'll throw a wild card at you here. You mentioned the cabinet. I hadn't planned on asking any questions about that, but If you had 1 to 3 people in your ideal world to put into Joe Biden's cabinet, who would they be?
I'm not. If I say that, then 4, 5, and 6 will get upset at me. But I would simply say, look,
Okay.
there are great people. You know them. I'm sure that many of them have been on the Young Turks. These are people who have fought for working class Americans. These are people who have been prepared to deal with income and wealth inequality and take on powerful special interests. People who understand that climate change is an existential threat. People who have been fighting for years for criminal justice reform, for immigration reform. You know the names. But it is important that, in my view, Biden selects some of the leading progressives in this country in his cabinet.
Okay, so we were talking about the task force. One more question about that. Some progressives are worried that we're getting played. We put people on a task force. It looks nice before the election. Try to get progressives to vote for Joe Biden. The election's over. The establishment comes back in and goes, "We were just kidding. We're not going to do any of that." So how do you talk to those folks, assuage them? Is there a thing that you could say that would get them to believe it? Is there a thing that Joe Biden could do to get them to believe that it's real?
Well, first of all, I will tell you, as somebody who, has talked to Biden about the task forces, you know the names of the people who are on it. These are some of the leading progressives in America. What Biden did not say, nor did his campaign staff say, "Oh, sorry, this person is too radical, this person is too progressive, we don't want him on the task force." That was not the case. So to answer your question, Cenk, if you're in Biden's position, if you're a staff member, then you're going to have to, if you weren't sincere in these efforts, then when these compromised task force reports come out, what are you going to say? Joe Biden will say, "Well, I had this task force on healthcare and on climate change and on education, immigration reform, but you know what? I really don't accept the conclusions, the compromised conclusions that were reached." I don't know that you could do that. You look pretty silly. So I think what he understands is not complicated. He's a very good politician. He understands that he needs, if he's going to beat Trump, he needs to grow the voter turnout. He needs to speak to young people in this country who are not enamored with him at this point, needs to speak to the progressive community, needs to speak to sections of the working class community. And through these task forces and the adopting of strong positions, he will be saying, not only do I hear you through your representatives on these task forces, these are the policies I'm going to campaign on. And if elected president, these are the policies I'm going to put into place and fight for.
Right. All right. Now let's talk about your plans going forward. Obviously, you're still a United States Senator. You're fighting very aggressively, especially in these times for the working class. But do you have plans to do more with the progressive movement? And what would that be?
Well, for a start, Cenk, let us understand, and it's just easy to forget about it. This is the most painful moment in the modern history of this country. It's just easy to forget about that reality. But not only have we lost 93,000 people to the pandemic, we have now seen in the last 9 weeks, 38 million people apply for unemployment benefits. Insane numbers, totally insane, unprecedented numbers. And right now, throughout this country, in my own state of Vermont, and throughout this country, there are millions and millions of people wondering how tomorrow they're going to feed their families. They're worried about getting evicted from their apartments or losing their homes or not being able to pay their credit card bills and see their credit card scores go way, way down. This is a terrible, terrible moment. And what Congress has got to do is to move aggressively once again on a new emergency package to deal with this crisis. It's an unprecedented crisis. We have to move forward in an unprecedented way. And what I would say is I think Nancy Pelosi and the House Democrats did something that was significant, but I think we have got to do better in the Senate. So I'm not sitting around here and saying, hey, let's just adopt what the House did. We have got to do better. And in my view, we have been focusing on 3 or 4 basic issues. Issue number one, we need what we call a Paycheck Security Act, which is similar to what was done in many European countries and says that you will continue to receive the paycheck and benefits that you got when you were in the office or in the factory. You're going to continue to get that. Number two, we have got to understand that especially in this crisis, that all of our people, regardless of income, regardless of what jobs they may or may not have had, are entitled to health care as a right. And that means we expand Medicare during the crisis. I'm going to continue the fight for Medicare for all in the future, as soon as this thing is over. But right now, at least, we got to make sure that all people have access to health care without out-of-pocket expenditures by expanding Medicare. Number three, we have got to understand that a $1,200 check, which is what we did once and what Pelosi would propose we do again, is just not enough. That's 1 month's rent. And I believe that every American should get at least $2,000 a month throughout this crisis. So those are some of the areas that we are focusing on right now.
So the progressive camp says, hey, you're looking for free testing and free treatment of coronavirus because it could threaten your life. Well, there's a lot of things that could threaten your life. That's why we should have Medicare for all, and you should have free testing and treatment for all that. Now, the Andrew Yang camp says, you guys are saying, let's do basically UBI for a couple of months here. Well, why don't we, because we have an emergency, but why don't we, if it's a good idea then, why don't we do UBA throughout?
Look,
how would you answer?
I respect Andrew, but once we're out of this crisis, I think the better approach, this is an emergency. And what we want to do is make sure that everybody in this country has the cash in their hand to pay their rent, to take care of, to buy the food they need, to take care of their basic needs. That's what we want to do. But I think what is a better approach long-term to the economic crisis that not only we face now, but where we go into the future, is to understand there is an enormous amount of work, absolutely vitally important work, that has to be done. We have a child care system which is totally dysfunctional. We need great, well-paid child care workers. We need great teachers. We need to transform our energy system, move aggressively to wind, solar, energy efficiency, transform our transportation system, millions of jobs under the rubric of a Green New Deal. We need a physical infrastructure program to rebuild our roads and our bridges and affordable housing, etc. So what I believe is not that we simply give a check to people over the long term. What I believe is we have federal guaranteed jobs at decent wages, If you are able to work, there will be a job for you, because God knows we have enough work to be done to create the kind of economy that we need and the kind of services that we need that will make us the kind of country we should be.
Senator, going back to Medicare for All and relating it to the campaign, in Mississippi, for example, 65% of the voters said that they wanted Medicare for All. Yet the result was 78-18 Biden over you. So what on God's green earth do you think happened?
Well, look, I think right now, and I'm not a great political analyst here, but I think essentially what is going on is that people are saying, yeah, I support Medicare for all. And Cenk, those numbers are growing every day because we are seeing the total failure of the current employer-based healthcare system. We're seeing it right now. So people are saying, yeah, I want Medicare for all. Yeah, of course, we got to raise the minimum wage. People are sympathetic. The fight that we have won is the ideological fight. We've won that in general, and we have won it very, very strongly among young people who are the future of this country. But I think a lot of people are out there are saying, well, these are great ideas, but my most important concern is that we beat Donald Trump. And for whatever reason, and there are a variety of reasons, a lot of older people felt more comfortable with Biden than with me. And that became the major issue. Who can best prepared to defeat Donald Trump. Now, between you and me, I think our campaign was best prepared, but that is not what voters in too many states concluded.
Yeah. So last question then. So as I was alluding to earlier, what you do going forward for the progressive movement is obviously very important. You are indisputably the godfather of the movement. And as progressives saw and your campaign saw, endorsements, it turns out, matters a lot, with Jim Clyburn's endorsement in South Carolina making such a gigantic difference, et cetera, and all of the establishment going and supporting Joe Biden. So, and I know this is an ironic situation because of the history that you and I had, but I thought you were amazing to offer the endorsement of me in the first place. And I know that the media piled on there, but removing that from the equation, if we can, are you planning to do more endorsements going forward of progressives? Because they desperately need that.
Absolutely. Not only that, Cenk, I'm very proud that in the last few months, our campaign and our great supporters, the millions of people who have supported us, they have contributed over $6 million to progressive organizations involved in helping working people during the pandemic. Number two, we have raised significant sums of money for strong candidates running for U.S. Congress, running for state houses all over this country, and we're going to continue to do it. So not only am I going to endorse progressives, to the best of our ability, we're going to raise money for those progressives.
All right, great to know. Senator Bernie Sanders, thank you so much for joining us on the Young Turks. Really appreciate it.
And keep up the great work, Cenk.
Thank you so much.